Hello there and welcome to another Astro Harry video. And I thought today I would do a little video on Orion, which is by far and away the best constellation in the night sky. And because we're coming into winter in the northern hemisphere, it's starting to rise and be nice and big and beautiful in the night sky when it's not cloudy, of course. But I wanted to look at it from 2 points of view. First of all, there's Orion, the constellation that you see with the naked eye just when you're looking up at the sky, but also there's the hidden depth in Orion, because Orion is absolutely chock-a-block full of interesting objects, both small scale and large scale, and it's amazing the amount of objects that there are in Orion. And there's something for everybody, whether you've got binoculars, a small telescope, a DSLR, whatever you've got, there's loads of things to have a look. So I hope you enjoy the video. So I thought I'd first of all just show you the Orion in the night sky. So this is when you're looking out, just whenever it's clear at the winter. Chances are you're going to see Orion, and Orion, rises in the east, sets in the west. It's usually pretty low down in the sky, but over the winter months it gets higher earlier, so it's a really good target. And you can't miss Orion, because Orion has this distinctive 2 stars at the top, 2 stars at the bottom, and then this belt of 3 stars. As I say, it's probably the best constellation that there is in terms of recognizing it and using it. Maybe the Plough could rival to it, but who knows? But the Plough gets enough attention, so we're going to have a look at Orion. So the main sort of points that you notice when you're looking at this in the night sky are the 2 brightest stars. So you've got Betelgeuse, or Betelgeuse, depending on how you want to pronounce it, and then you've got Rigel there. Now, for the northern hemisphere, Betelgeuse is at the top, Rigel's at the bottom. Flip it around in the southern hemisphere, that's fine. So these stars are very similar in terms of their brightness. So Betelgeuse is occasionally brighter than Rigel, but Rigel is usually the brightest star. But the main difference that you notice, even with the naked eye, is in the colour. So Rigel is a very bright whitish blue star, and Betelgeuse is a very deep orange red star. And even with naked eye you can do that. So if you get a pair of binoculars, you can really tell the difference in the colour between the two. And that's simply because the stars are at different stages in their life cycle. So Rigel is a relatively young supergiant. It's absolutely ginormous, this thing. It's about 20 times as big as the sun, and yet it's over 800 light years away. It's absolute beast, and Rigel will not be around for much longer on cosmological terms, because it's burning its fuel that rapidly that it's eventually going to end up being a red supergiant, which is what Betelgeuse is. So as the stars get older, they cool down, which is why they go from blue to red, but also they get bigger and brighter. So if we get on our time machine and come back here in a few million years' time, these 2 stars may look identical. So Rigel is a really big bright star. Betelgeuse, on the other hand, is a different animal. So it's what's called a red supergiant. So physically, it's ginormous, and it's that big that we can actually use professional telescopes to measure the surface. So we can measure the width of the surface of the star, but also see patterns on it, see convection, all sorts of really interesting things. And we did this in the 1920s, so it's not even like we're using super duper lasers and adaptive optics. We did this a while ago. The problem you have with very, very large red giants is that they don't tend to have a diffuse edge to them like our sun does, because they're so big. The stars spread out so wide that we don't know exactly where the star ends. So they reckon this thing can be as wide as, say, from our sun to Mars, all the way up to maybe our sun to Saturn. It could be that big. So imagine a star filling practically the entire of our solar system. That's how big this star is, and it's fascinating. So at the end of 2019, they wondered if Betelgeuse was actually that old now that it was about to go supernova, which is basically an exploding star. And the reason for that is because it went very dim. And so they had to do some tests, and they were looking at it, and they reckon at the end of the day it was a big cloud of dust or something in its own little solar system that was blocking out the light. But in cosmological terms, it's going to go any moment. Now, the problem is that cosmological terms are millions of years, so I can't say it's going to happen like tomorrow. But when it goes, it's going to be absolutely spectacular. This thing will be visible during daylight. It will cast shadows. It will, obliterate half of the night sky. So that's good. And because of the distance that it is, so it's about 600 light years away. It may have already gone, but because it takes 600 years for the light to get here, we won't know. So who knows? But those are the two stars that are the most distinctive. And then just underneath the belt, you've got the sort of sword of Orion, the hilt of Orion. And this is, again, it's visible with the naked eye, and it sort of looks like a bit of a fuzzy patch. But what it is, it's a giant nebula. So it's a giant cloud of gas and dust, and inside of that nebula are stars being formed. So you can actually, with the Hubble telescope, you can see pictures of stars actually being born, these proto stars, and you can see like mini solar systems and all sorts of things. So this is basically like a stellar nursery, and they reckon it's something like 1,000 stars that are being born at the moment. And it's those stars that are lighting up the gas and the dust in the Orion Nebula and making it shine. And it's relatively close to us, and it's also huge. I think it's about 24 light years across, which is why we can see it with the naked eye. So that's Orion. As far as your sort of average punter who looks up at the sky and sees it, they notice the shape and the two bright stars and the sword. But I came across something called Project Orion recently. And it's a guy in America who has spent 2.5 years photographing every sort of square inch, if that's the right term, square arc second of the constellation in an absolute minute detail, and using lots of filters and lots of clever techniques to build up a high resolution version of Orion. So look at Orion now, and I will show you his version. And this is Orion, and it is absolutely amazing how how much detail there is there. So it's turned on its side because obviously to get it into the landscape. So we've got Betelgeuse there, and then we've got Rigel there. We've got our belt, and then there's the Orion Nebula. But there is so much going on with this constellation. It is absolutely ridiculous. So he's very kindly hosted this, and he allows anybody to go in, and they can zoom in and they can zoom out and they can look at various things. So the first thing we're going to do is zoom into the Orion Nebula. So this is the main part of the Orion Nebula. So it's this part, this sort of crab shape, if you like. Now, because of the way that the guys kept the photography consistent, the core of the nebula is what we call it blown out. So as you can see, it's just a blob of white. What there actually is there are 4 stars called the trapezium, and there's 4 big bright stars, and they are the main stars that light up the nebula. But if you go on something like Wikipedia, or even just try it yourself with your own equipment, you can actually sort of see more detail within there. But this, you can see it's absolutely huge, this object, and there's filaments of gas flying off and all sorts of things, and there's so much detail in here that you can enjoy. It's ridiculous. And then next door is this object. So this is M43. So this has a few names. The most popular seems to be called the Running Man Nebula. So this sits sort of on top, if you like, if you're in the northern hemisphere of M42 of the Orion Nebula. And it's all part of the same thing, because the reason why Orion looks like this is because there is something called the Orion Molecular Cloud, or OMC1. And it's basically this huge, and absolutely massive, thousands of light years across, cloud of gas and dust that is sort of engulfs, if you like, the constellation. Obviously we're not in 3D, we're in 2D here, so the constellation is actually behind things like Rigel and Betelgeuse. But on the whole, it's the whole, all of these sort of deep sky objects that you see are because of this molecular cloud, and where it's clumping up and forming stars and doing things, that's when you're seeing these objects. So they're and M42 is very rewarding in anything, binoculars upwards. In fact, it's actually too big for some telescopes. So sort of as you go up the sort of your apertures and your mirror sizes or your lens sizes or whatever, it can be too big. and so you need to do use clever stuff to get hold of that. So yes, that's the sort of the sort of main view of M42. Then the next thing we see is one of the most iconic objects in this entire sort of deep sky back catalogue, whatever you want to call it. So this is the Horsehead Nebula. So this very, very bright star there is actually one of the stars of the belt. So it's an easy object to find in a telescope. So you go to that star, and obviously you go to one side, the other side, and there's two very famous deep sky objects. So the first thing is our friend, the Horsehead Nebula. So you'll see this on book covers. One of the first books I ever got had that on the cover, and you just never forget it. So I've captured the Horsehead Nebula. It's quite a tricky target to see visually. You need a hydrogen alpha filter, or you need incredibly dark skies to be able to see this with a telescope. But using an astrocam or stacking techniques, DSLR, that sort of thing, you can take a pretty good stab at that. And then next door is this, it's called the Flame Nebula. So again, it's one of these clouds of gas and dust, and you can see it being illuminated, if you like, by the bright star. But there's also other stars there that are causing it to to light up. And it's just a fantastic, wonderful object. And the beautiful thing about Orion is that all of these things are easy enough to find because you've got this constellation. You can just go and say, right, it's down there, it's left, right, up, down, whatever's. It's not one of these where you need a really clever go-to mount and you're putting in loads of coordinates. So that's incredible. So as we come out, you'll see we've got this sort of crescent shape, croissant shape, whatever you want to call it. So this is called the Barnard Loop. So this is a loop of gas and dust that's part of this molecular cloud that's visible with either, if you've got a dark sky and you take a sort of 20-30 second exposure with a DSLR, just natively, just with a normal lens, you can get it, or you can, there are clever ways, as this guy has taken several photographs, images using a telescope and done it that way. But yes, that big shape there is a loop, and this is almost like a standard test for how good your seeing is, how dark your skies are, because if you can pick this up on a 20-30 second exposure on a camera, you're going to have to do that. And I'm going to have a go at that at some point, because we've got to have a try at this. So I live in Northumberland, and Northumberland has a massive dark sky park area. I don't know what you want to call it. It's 500 square miles worth of protected land. So I'm going to go up there at some point and have a go at seeing if I can capture this through a DSLR. So another object is this thing at the top, and this has its various names: the Shark Nebula, the Witch's Head Nebula. So it's slightly different to the other objects in that it's got this grey bluey tinge to it. And the reason why nebulas are different colours is because the gas inside of them is made up of different things, and when they get what's called excited, which means when they get either hit by radiation or heated up by stars, they emit light, and the light tells us what the gas is. So your reddy things like this Barnard Loop stuff near the Horsehead, your red light is hydrogen alpha, so comes off hydrogen. Then your more bluey stuff, which is like the Witch's Head, tends to be things like oxygen. It's called oxygen 3. A little bit of sulfur as well. There's also a second hydrogen beta, so they tend to be sort of the bluey colours. Sometimes you also get a bit of carbon, nitrogen. They're all roughly in that sort of blue-green spectrum, so it's straight away telling astronomers what these things are made of. But this is a cool object. Again, this is a very specialist dark sky object, so you can't just get your binoculars and see it like that. You need some pretty good seeing. So that's fun. And then the next thing is this object up here. So that's called the Lambda Orionis ring, and again, it's just another aspect of the big molecular cloud. And this is a beautiful object as well. There's not very much more you can say about that apart from how pretty it is as well. And then we have Casper, the friendly ghost. There he is. So it's M78 this, but it's also got a nickname of Casper the Friendly Ghost. I've observed this through my own 5-inch telescope, and I can see why. It does look like a nice ghost. I mean, this has got loads of detail on it, but it does seem like a nice ghost as well. And this is another beautiful object, and you can actually see a massive sort of band of dust going across it, and that shows you what we're dealing with here. So they can use infrared telescopes to actually get through all of this dust, but it just shows you that bit's been illuminated and that isn't. So that bit's got a star and that hasn't, and it's just absolutely mind-blowing what's going on with that as well. So it's great. There's one thing that isn't in this picture, which is a bit of a shame, and that is right up here somewhere at the top is the Monkey's Head Nebula, and it looks a little bit like a sort of skull, and that's a really nice object to find. Because it's at the top, it's a lot easier to get at than some of the other things for Northern Hemisphere observers. You know, it rises earlier and it's higher in the sky, so you get away from all the murk and what have you of the atmosphere. So that's really a really pretty one as well. So the final object I'm going to show you is NGC 1999, and this is a little bit of a hidden gem. So just below the Orion Nebula, as I zoom in, there we go, there's this little cloud here, and it's an absolutely fascinating object. So as you zoom in, you can see there's a bit of a hole there, so I'll just let it load, and the astronomers just assumed it was another bit of gas or dust or something that was in the way, sort of between us and the object behind it. But they've actually used loads of clever telescopes, and it's an empty hole in space. It is just a part of this molecular cloud that's completely devoid of anything. No stars, no dust, no gas, no nothing. So it's a bit like peering through a well, on a cosmic scale, that you see nothing. You see literally nothing, and I'm dying to have a little go at this. So, and I just scratching the surface really of this absolutely fantastic constellation. When you look up at the night sky, yes, you can see the obvious things, the stars and the Orion Nebula, but it's absolutely mind-blowing how much extra objects that there are, and they are all well within the capabilities of an amateur setup. If you've got a telescope or binoculars, you can see the Flame Nebula, you can see M43, you can see M42. And if you've got yourself just a DSLR, just any DSLR, whack it on a tripod, take some long exposures, find yourself somewhere dark, see if you can capture all these filaments of gas. And then if you've got a more advanced setup and about things like taking exposures and stacking and that sort of thing, and using stacking software and doing a bit of Photoshop, then you can look at things like the Horsehead Nebula. You can look at Monkey's Head up there, and our little friend Casper the Ghost, whatever. The constellation has so much to offer for lots of different levels of amateur astronomers, and because it's winter in the Northern Hemisphere, you get plenty of opportunities to do it. It goes dark 6 o'clock-ish, 5 o'clock-ish. You've got lots and lots of time that you can spend looking around this constellation. I hope you enjoyed the video anyway, and I hope you get a chance to go and have a look. And maybe the next time you look at Orion, you'll look at it in a slightly different light than just seeing the regular pattern that we all know and love. Thank you.